Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Usama, and our today's guest is Neema, who has joined us from Boston and is currently working as head of engineering at McKinsey. But other than that, she's also served in technical leadership positions throughout her career. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about her professional career progression, some reflections from it, and the book that she published. So, with that, let's get started, Neema. We're very excited to have you on board. How had your day been so far?
Thank you, Usama. Thank you for having me today. My day is really going great. Started a bit early, but so far so good. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Let's get started, Nima. First of all, I've noticed that you had a very dynamic and I must say a very challenging career for you because you've served in these technical leadership positions. So first of all, give us an elevator pitch about how your professional journey had been and what are some of the reflections from it.
I started off with the Indian Navy to begin with as one of the first three executive women officers for Indian Navy, working directly
Hmm.
under admirals and President of India for some of the special projects of Navy. So I
Excellent.
think that gave me kind of like an edge for other roles, you know. And I always say this: there's something about the military or the Navy that teaches you that you don't get in the corporate world. I think so a little bit of discipline, organization, planning that comes
Hmm.
with being in armed forces is something that I carried forward with my other roles, be it as
Right.
application development leader at American Express or global
Hmm.
head of automation at McKesson. I think there were some values and beliefs that were instilled that I carried forward. So, yeah.
Right. Interesting. So, if you were to specifically dig deeper into your current title as head of engineering, so first of all, share with us a brief introduction about what this role entails. What are the general expectations from it, and what are the general deliverables?
I'm currently the head of engineering for cloud data analytics and AI for McKinsey and Co. This means
Mm-hmm.
that I'm responsible for all data, everything related to data and governance and security and
Mm-hmm.
visualization, AI, everything connected to data within McKinsey. Right.
Right.
So when I moved into the role, the expectation was everything that was on-prem had to be moved to the
Mm-hmm.
cloud. And the challenge was to design the next generation cloud data analytics platform that could be not
Mm-hmm.
just internally used, but something that could be showcased to the outside world because McKinsey, as you know, is a world's leading consultancy company. And
100%.
yeah,
Yes.
and one of the things we believe is sharing our knowledge, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the whole next gen platform that we are building today will obviously be shared with our clients in the future, right? So that was the intention. So
Right.
we had to come up with
Mm-hmm.
something very new, very innovative to begin with, and that was the ask when I was hired. And we are halfway through the
Mm-hmm.
journey, and I'm confident we will get there in
Right.
about a year. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So again, wearing your engineering hat. So whenever you guys are tackling an engineering problem, what is the general, what is the general set of questions that you ask yourself? What is the right way of addressing a problem with an engineering mindset?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to have an engineering degree as well as a business administration degree in operations. So what that
Hmm.
does to me is like I'm not just thinking like just a typical engineer. I'm also looking at it from the business point of view. And I think it's very
Right.
important to consider every problem from business point of view as well as the technical point of view. Sometimes just to give you an
Hmm.
example, the ease of implementation may not be the
Hmm.
same as return on investment. It could be highly
Yeah.
complex problem that could bring you lots of return on investment, or it could be a quick win
Hmm.
that doesn't bring you anything, right? So having
Right.
that, wearing those two hats for any technical leader is very important in this day and
Hmm.
age. And it's not just the technology that supports problem solving these
Hmm.
days.
Hmm.
Technology, in fact, aids problem solving, but it's not really actually problem solving for you, in other words, right? So it's very
Yeah.
important that we look at it both from the business perspective, the complexity, and the return
Hmm.
on investment perspective, along with supporting technologies that can assist the implementation.
Right, that's interesting. So although you did get your formal education, but in your experience, I'd say, so while someone is improving in their technical experience and aptitude, how should one get a sound business understanding of the industry that they're working in alongside their engineering skills?
Shadowing is one of them. Like I always encourage my people to shadow some of the business guys in their free time, or even
Mm-hmm.
set some time aside to go and meet with someone and understand what the business looks like. Not just the
Mm-hmm.
business that they're working, but ancillary
Right.
business, the things that they're connected to. That is one. And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, what I've observed is for most technologists, stick to what they know, right? Like, oh, I am a Java
Right.
engineer, I know Python or something like that, and I will only stick to doing
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing today. So I encourage
Mm-hmm.
engineers to look beyond their comfort zone and like move on to
Right.
areas that they have not explored. You don't know where the gold mine is, right? So, and you may not really find
Right.
gold everywhere, but ultimately the overall experience will give you that
Yeah.
edge over others, right? So that is
Right.
something that I have personally followed as well. I've moved even within the same department, I've moved different places just to understand the complexity of that environment, and
Yeah.
intricacies more than complexity, the intricacies, because at the surface level, it may look different from when you understand the details. So it's
Yeah.
important for every engineer to kind of move and understand the technology or business that they're working with.
Yeah, right. Interesting. So, if you were to talk about career development and strategy,
Mhm.
so in your opinion, for people who are, let's say, in the first quadrant or maybe in the early phase of their career, what should they be start doing that would turn out to be a meaningful career strategy, so they can eventually end up being in either executive roles or director level positions, let's say.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to fail and be a little more risk taking in the initial years. You can't really experiment a whole lot when you turn maybe at the director level,
Yeah.
right? When I say that, like you're
Yeah.
assigned a specified role, but as a junior
Mm-hmm.
programmer, you can try many things. So again, going back to my previous point, I would highly encourage the junior lot to try these different aspects of technology.
Mm-hmm.
When I say that, a lot of engineers, let's say, are with software engineering and building
Yeah.
products, and they really don't get to work with network engineering, or security for that
Correct.
matter.
Yeah.
I would really encourage
Yeah.
engineers to go to security network just to get that 360-degree view of things versus just sticking to one
Mm-hmm.
area. And what it does to you is like when you get into a director position, let's say somebody on the network side is
Yeah.
telling you, hey, we can't do this. And then you can actually counter them saying,
Yeah.
no, 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 that's not what I know. And when I was working here,
Yeah.
I could do all these
Yeah.
four things, and it has happened to me
Yeah.
even in my career, like,
Mm-hmm.
multiple times where I have countered, not because I was this SME in network engineering or security engineering. It's only because of my
Yeah.
um, working knowledge at some point in time during my career.
Right. Interesting. And again, talking to you while you have your leadership hat on,
Mhm.
so considering that you've worked in a lot of different departments and different companies as well. So what are being a leader? What are some of the productive you know traits that you've seen in departments that would have boosted employee morale, or maybe they would have boosted productivity or something like that? So what would be your take on that?
So one of the, I think for us as employees, including myself, whatever level you're in, I think one of the things people expect from their leaders or anyone above them is transparency, honesty, and integrity. As long as people are
Mm-hmm.
transparent, their leaders are transparent, giving them like frequent updates about what's happening and the truth of it, right? Like, some leaders
Mm-hmm.
kind of give a wishy-washy statement or give like a nicely painted rose to begin with. I don't do that. I give them the truth, and
Yeah.
what it does to me is I get their support to either to go forward if something is missing. And if everything is
Right.
fine, then we celebrate together. I also like to have team events every now and then, like at least once in 3 months or a quarter. We all
Mm-hmm.
celebrate as a team all the wins, even if it means those are small wins. We believe in
Yeah.
celebrating. It's almost like a family. It just kind of becomes your own family when you lead a large team.
Yeah.
That is how I look
Yeah.
at things. Yeah.
Interesting. So another thing that really caught my attention was that not only that you have your technical acumen as well as your business understanding, but you've also been an inventor of sorts as well. So if you can share more details about it in public, what was your patent about, and how was the process for you?
So it's a good question because there's a little bit of background. I was not really
Mm-hmm.
sure of patent, and I didn't know the process for patent, to be honest, when I first
Yeah.
had for my first patent at least. So American Express lost the Costco deal, and we had pretty much lost 1 in 8 cards at that time in 2015. And
Mm-hmm.
when I went to office, I saw a lot of people were crying because they were now sure they would lose their jobs, right? And I
Ooh.
came home
Okay.
and I told my husband, hey,
Yeah.
I had this great idea a long time ago, and I think that can really solve for Costco loss. And he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really sure. And I said, like, maybe I need to talk to somebody. And then he
Yeah.
actually teased me saying, hey, you're talking like CEO of Amex, right? Like this is, I mean, maybe CEO
Yeah.
should be thinking of it, like in other words.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I,
Mm-hmm.
I took my idea and I didn't know who to call. So someone told me, hey,
Mm-hmm.
General Counsel's office does patent and things like that. So maybe you need to discuss your idea with them. And so I called the
Yeah.
General Counsel office directly. And the GC said, "Hey, this is a great idea. Don't talk
Mm-hmm.
to anyone. Who have you spoken
Yeah.
to?" And I said, like, only my husband. They're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, we are coming down in three
Yeah.
days. Don't share the idea." And so,
Nice.
so they
They
actually
should
flew
make a
down
movie
from,
out of it.
yeah, they flew down from New York to
Yeah.
Phoenix. I
Yeah.
was at Phoenix at that
Uh-huh.
time. And then we
Uh-huh.
discussed the idea a little more in depth. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we would like to file a patent. This, like and it could replace the Costco loss, honestly, and something that could bring 14 billion
Yeah.
year-on-year revenue. So
Wow.
we had,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
it was for
Yeah.
a niche population, although I can't
Yeah.
give you the trade secrets, but it was more for
Yeah.
something that I have background with, which is the armed
Yeah.
forces, a card for armed forces all over the globe, kind of a niche population that is untapped at the moment, right? A special card that can
Yeah.
cater to their spend. So, so the ROI was calculated, and that's how we went about filing the patent. Yeah.
Right, that is so interesting. So, although you did touch base on how your experience with armed forces helped you in your corporate experience, but if I were to specifically ask you about stress management, or when you're in such leading positions, of course there's more responsibility, there's more tasks to do, and there's naturally more stress, right? So, what are your coping mechanisms for stress?
I think I got trained well, but I also, all of us are inherently trained, by God Himself, I guess, in stress management.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would be dead the first few years, right? So,
Right.
uh, if I keep that argument aside, the other way to
Hmm.
do it is compartmentalize.
Hmm.
Like, yes, there is this situation which is stressful. Does that have to rule over every other situation in my life? No. So I put that in a tiny box in my own head, like
Yeah.
maybe an imaginary box, and keep it on a side. Okay, I have to deal with
Hmm.
it at some point, but maybe
Yeah.
not today, or maybe not at this
Yeah.
point in time. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
compartmentalization really helps you
Hmm.
get over a lot of your anxiety and stress. So then you
Hmm.
start to see, okay, I have two stressful situations today compared to four wins and five different family outings, well, whatever that is, like when you take stock
Correct.
of
Yeah.
your inventory of things in your own head, your
Yeah.
stress is just maybe two out of the eight things that you did in a day, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's how I look at it,
Yeah.
and so it kind of helps me. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. That is pretty cool. So one last question, maybe in this chain of corporate questions. So once you've started exercising in leadership positions, were there any myths about specifically about leadership that got busted for you?
um, yeah, I thought, at some point I would think like all senior leaders are committed to whatever they have said. Like for me, that was a myth,
Hmm.
right? Yes, a lot of leaders
Right.
maintain or are accountable for their commitment, but there are also
Hmm.
a few who don't really hold themselves accountable or responsible for the commitment they have given. So that
Right.
was actually a myth that I had, I guess, in my head. And over a period of few years now, I think I've gotten over that mindset and I've learned to deal with that.
Right.
Mhm.
Interesting. And if I were to talk to you about hiring as well, and again specifically talking about vertical growth,
Mhm.
what would be some of the traits that you would want to see in an ideal candidate?
I think a combination of situational based leadership as well as technical acumen and business acumen. When I say that, like a lot of technology leaders think that it's knowing a
Mm-hmm.
particular technology that gets them forward. But I
Mm-hmm.
think in today's world, because of the complexity and ever changing technology, you need someone with a growth mindset or somebody with a learner's mindset.
Right.
It's not like you know four things today and those would be the four
Mm-hmm.
things for 4 years from now, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you need to constantly adapt to the changing world and changing technology. And so for me, it's important any future leader has that adaptation to change as one of their priorities, at the moment.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So again, switching gears a little bit and talking about academics. So you've gotten your engineering and your business degree.
Mm.
Were there any, I would say, differences between what the academia is able to provide and what the industry is demanding at this point of time?
Yeah, so I think the academia lays the foundation, but rest everything you need
Mm-hmm.
to keep up with the changing world, right? Like, in other words, like
Right.
things like blockchain. Did it exist 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, 20 years ago? No, the answer.
Yeah.
So 2008 was when it was
Yeah.
invented, but it took a while
Yeah.
for, the companies to catch up. So what I'm trying to say is it's
Mm-hmm.
ever changing. So if you are somebody who completed your engineering prior to 2008, that didn't even exist. So
Mm-hmm.
you have your foundation,
Right.
but you have to constantly keep up with the changing technology. So that is where I
Right.
think your learning capabilities come into play, and keeping up with the latest and greatest
Mm-hmm.
that is in the market today comes into play. So I would,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And if we were to talk about technical upskilling, so in your opinion, what is the best way to learn? Basically, would it be certifications? Would it be experience? And again, if it's a blend of both,
Mhm.
so let's say if you are acquiring or doing some certifications in an area that you like the most, but you don't really have access to do a large scale project on it. So how do you gain or complement that certification experience with some real world project experience?
What I have done is there are some certifications I've taken. I have also taken courses that I don't really aim for certification. Certification is, for me, I think, a feel good factor for most people, right? I see it on LinkedIn, a lot of
Okay.
people writing, this is my 50th certification and posting that
Right.
certificate, right? What does it mean,
Yeah.
50th certification? How have you applied the rest, or the other 49 that you have completed,
Hmm.
how have you used that in your day-to-day life? That for me is important. So some of the courses that I undertake, I may not even
Hmm.
certify myself in that, but like I've used that in practical life. Like, I gave you an example of blockchain. Like, I learned
Correct.
to
Yeah.
I trained myself in blockchain, all three, Ethereum, Hyperledger, multi-ledger, everything, all three types in Solana now.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
but I did a hands-on POC in my day-to-day work. Like, I was like, okay, can I solve this problem? Whenever a problem comes to me, I'm like thinking, okay, what is the technology that I can use to solve this? Can I use it with a newer technology? And that's how your
Yeah.
certification or course or learning comes handy, and that's how you
Hmm.
put to use. So it's very important. You see certification as
Hmm.
not just papers and something that you can put it on resume. It's more, you need to see
Right.
how can I problem solve. It's almost like a tool at that point in your toolkit, to
Makes
solve
sense. Makes
day-to-day
sense. Yeah.
problems. And most of these
Yeah.
technologies have the same underlying programming languages. So,
So talking about core values again, technical knowledge is one thing, but having a disciplined mind and a good set of core values that would help you navigate through this corporate world is essential as well. So what are some of the core values that Nima you uphold in your professional life?
For me, like I mentioned earlier on, Usama, honesty is very important. Honesty and integrity and transparency. Like we don't have to
Yeah.
hide anything to go to another level, or be it horizontally or vertically. And people recognize that in the long run, right? A lot
Hmm.
of people think, okay, nobody's watching me, so I can afford to do this one small mistake or next small mistake, but that's not true. Everyone is
Yeah.
watching you, like at any given point, somebody is
Hmm.
watching you. So I think even like maintaining those strong core values will guide you through the process. Like I said, technology is ever changing. So what is that? What are those
Hmm.
some things that you can keep as constants in your life, right? These are your beliefs
Right.
and value system that come with you, and those beliefs and value systems should be a bit of a constant, right? In
Makes
So that's
sense.
how I look
Yeah.
at it. Yeah.
Right. And again, talking about success, it looks different for different people. What would be your definition of success?
For me, these days I've started to look at differently. For me, like when I take up a challenge, if I have completed a challenge to the best of my ability, and it's a functioning software, or it's a successful digital transformation or a successful
Hmm.
cloud migration, that is success in terms of implementation, right?
Right.
But have I shared that knowledge with others? Have I brought somebody up in my journey along with me? That also defines the success
Hmm.
along the way. It's
Right.
not just the projects, it's also the people, and
Hmm.
the process, how you follow it, and how much of knowledge you've shared with others. And that's one of the reasons, right? Like I do podcasts or like maybe some speaking engagements, so that it's you can't really reach a bigger audience without that, right? So I think it's
Absolutely.
one way of
Yeah.
sharing the knowledge.
Yeah. Perfect. So, what are some of the techniques or practices that you might have incorporated in your life to stay on top of the changing trends in the industry?
I haven't done this for the last 6 7 months. I admit that,
Hmm.
but prior to that, I would really study for at least an hour and a half every day, right? I would come back from work, whatever that
Okay.
time is, and then
Hmm.
literally take a technology and go all out to study that. Like I said, I wouldn't care about
Hmm.
whether get certified or not, but it's
Okay.
more understanding in depth. And like there's lots of hands-on courses these days, and so you do your own POC in your desktop, and like it doesn't have to
Hmm.
benefit you at that point in time, but overall, like how to combine one or two technologies together to problem solve in
Yeah.
the future. So that's something I
Right.
really encourage people. Like all of us lead busy lives, but I think it's important to make that time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And other than talking about corporate stuff, I've noticed that you've been an author as well. So how was that process for you? And what was your inspiration to write a book? And if possible, do give us a summary of what is it about?
Yeah, The Cinderella Elephant is the book I wrote. That was my first and only book so far. So the
Hmm.
inspiration was actually my daughter. I always wanted
Okay.
to write
Yeah.
the book, but I wasn't sure
Yeah.
about what, right?
Hmm.
And so when she was very young, she would ask
Hmm.
my husband and I to tell her a story every night. And the
Hmm.
good part was she would give us the themes, and we had to tell a story, like dinosaur in a lotus pond or something. So the story
Right.
had to be based on a dinosaur in a pond with lotus and everything. So one day
Hmm.
she asked me, like, I want a story about Cinderella elephant, and I said, no, elephants can't be Cinderellas. And so it
Yeah.
ended there. We went on to another story, but I went to
Hmm.
office and thought about it. Why did I kind of refuse to make
Hmm.
Cinderella, the elephant, as Cinderella? And I
Yeah.
felt that it was the uncomfortable feeling of not, like, kind of like we all have a certain perception about life and things the way it
Right.
should be, right? So I
Hmm.
think it was kind of, my daughter was kind of prompting me to be coming out of my comfort zone, and I was not really
Hmm.
comfortable. So I went next day,
Right.
like next night, I told her, hey,
Yeah.
elephants can be Cinderellas, and I told her a story about it. And that actually
Hmm.
prompted me to write the book. I'm like thinking, like, all of us are Cinderella elephants in some ways, because even when you take an
Hmm.
interview, right, like you're going with a kind of a preconceived notion about what candidate you want versus like really hearing the candidate and trying to fit in your head like how can I fit
Mm-hmm.
him or her to the role that I have, how can I create that person's future. Instead we are thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I need these five things, five different types of technology, this person should know, this person should talk like this, and
Yeah.
is almost a
Yeah.
preconceived notion at that time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to change
Mm-hmm.
that thought process, and the Cinderella Elephant was my way of kind of mentoring the young managers. The book is
Mm-hmm.
has some I think about 20 short stories where I'm encouraging the leaders or the future leaders, young managers, to look
Mm-hmm.
at their own lives and learn from
Right.
their experiences and use their experiences in the corporate world
Mm-hmm.
to kind of solve the problems of the corporate world. So
Right.
in the book, I've gone back and forth about my childhood story, some fictional, some a little bit of fiction, some non-fictional, of course, and use my own experiences to explain how we can use our own life experience, day-to-day experiences, reflect back on it, observe things, and then use it to solve real-world problems. So that is the overall crust of the book.
Right, that is interesting. And if we specifically talk about youth, so lately there's this notion of job hopping, basically, that for young people right now, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And most people, make a considerable amount of switches, over a certain period of time. So, in your opinion, what technically should these job hoppings be based on? And if somebody were to stay within organization and not make too many switches, what should that decision be based on in your experience?
So I won't say one is better than the other. It depends on how prepared
Mm-hmm.
you are. You need to ask yourself this question. A lot of times I see youngsters hopping jobs because they feel they're getting maybe 10K extra or some perks that is there that is not available
Yeah.
here, free food or something. Those are some of the things that
Yeah.
companies use these days to kind of
Yeah.
attract talent, but
Right.
it's almost like a marketing gimmick at that point in time, like any other retail goods that they,
Mm-hmm.
like the advertisement they use to attract you for retail goods. So should you be getting into that job hopping? Not if you're not ready. Like the reason I say that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you may be successful once, twice, three times, and I'm not
Yeah.
talking about the geniuses here. There could be a genius, he or she, and
Mm-hmm.
or anyone out there like who could just
Mm-hmm.
hop every year and become the CEO of a company one day. Okay, but that's
Right.
a limited lot. Having set that aside, for a regular average, above average person, like, you need to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you hop job every year, you're not gaining that experience, you're really not staying long enough to understand the intricacies of the jobs that you have been through, right? So what that does
Right.
to you is, okay, you may become a director in 6 or 7 years, but then you really
Yeah.
don't have the depth to lead a team of, let's say, 150, 200 people at that point. And people are not very
Right.
forgiving when you're at that level, right? They observe their
Mm-hmm.
leaders, they point out every mistake, and then you don't want to reach that level and be known as a failure or a leader who doesn't know how to lead. In order to be
Absolutely.
successful, you need to learn the ropes. And so learning the ropes, one way is like staying at least 2.5, 3 years in a job and understanding at every level, every vertical level,
Yeah.
and then making those horizontal
Mm-hmm.
movements, not just vertically. Yeah.
Uh, right. So thank you so much once again, Neema. Now that we've reached the end of our conversation, we'll end it on the note of maintaining a decent work-life balance. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, for me, fortunately, I'm good at time management, so it's come a little more easy for me, but for people who are not great at it, I would actually ask them to set time aside for things
Mm-hmm.
that they want to do. And even today, I set some time aside for, let's say, email and presentations on my calendar. The reason I do
Right.
that is like I don't want to carry
Mm-hmm.
forward the emails that came into my inbox today for next day. So typically, I answer every single one of them within 24 hours of getting that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason I can do that is because I set some time aside every day. So kind of organizing
Yeah.
yourself in a little more planned way, I would say, will, I think, help you get
Hmm.
that work-life balance. And you need to prioritize things. Like work will always be there, right? Like you need to prioritize
Yeah.
some things. I've had people
Yeah.
missing a lot of birthdays and everything for some things, the children's school, and it may not be really worth it in the long run, right? So prioritize. I'm not saying you shouldn't work, but
Hmm.
yeah. So those are some of the
Absolutely.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nima. And with that, we'll close off the conversation. Thank you so much once again for being here with us. I had a lot to learn as well. And as far as our audience are concerned, if you like the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And do let us know about your thoughts in the comments below. Until the next episode rolls out, do check us out on other streaming platforms and take care of yourself. And we'll see you in the next episode.